editorx allows us to write custom JavaScript methods and functions inside of its platform. This is something that other site builders simply don't let you do. We're going to be checking out how this works using Velo, as well as building out some onclick handlers and things like that. So let's just jump straight into it. Let's take a look at what Velo is, because there is some documentation and it does work a little bit different than what you're probably used to. The very first thing to take note of is that Velo is essentially JavaScript with some additional functionality as well as some customization there. So it does support JavaScript features. On top of that, you can actually import modules as well. And it does have JavaScript fetch API integrated too. Finally, you can share JavaScript code between the front end and the back end through their web modules. This is also using some of the latest standards. So for example, if you want to use ES 2019, then that is enabled. So essentially this means that we can use async await functionality with arrows as well. This means that we don't have to worry about Babel constructors, Babel transforms or anything like that. There's also module support for this, which is pretty cool. And finally, if we have a look at some of the examples here, we can actually pull in different functions from different, files that we create, and we can console log them out just like normal. So far, so good. Pretty much similar to like how we would build out an application on maybe Node.js. There's a few other things we can take a look at here as to say exporting objects and then later importing them to use, and we can take a look at all of those. But the best way to do this is to actually jump into the code to take a look. So let's do just that. I've actually created a site here and we're going to be working inside of this environment. If you've got your own site, the very first thing you'll need to do is jump here into DevTools and select to turn dev mode on. So to do this, simply select this option right over here, which keeps disappearing for me, and select this one. We'll get this nice sidebar here on the left. And what we'll get is also a little section here for editing our code. This is almost like vscode inside of the web browser, which is really cool. We'll get the functions and code that we can write right in here. And otherwise, if we want to create custom files, we can do that too. We've got public files we can add in here. We've got some backend files we can add in here. And finally, we can also even import modules from NPM. Things like libraries like Moment and stuff that we can use inside of our functions. What we'll do is head over to the page code. The pages have their own code here. We can see it just below. If we take a look, we have this $W, and this is referring to the page ID, which is page 1 in this case. We can pass in console.log hello world, and we're going to save this just to see what this looks like on our page. We'll select to preview, and when we preview our page, we're going to have a developer console here at the bottom that we can view. And in here we can see hello world has appeared. This is just over here. This is how we can test out our code to make sure it's working. The other thing we can do is add actual custom functions in here to be able to do maybe different tools or different options depending on what you want to really do. So in this case, what I'm going to try and do is just create a simple button. And here for our button, I'm just going to scroll down a tiny bit so we can see it. It's called Start Now. And this button itself has its own ID. What's useful is that when we select it, on the bottom right here, we actually get its custom ID. We can change this to maybe Start Now, so it's got a custom ID. We also get to see its current event handlers. So we've got onclick, on double clicked, mouse in, mouse out, etc. I'm going to create a custom event handler here called onclick. We can name this whatever we want. The predefined name here is start now _ click, and I'm just going to select enter on that. When we do, we get this custom function here that's also being exported. It's passing in an event here, and here we can add some custom code. So let's actually do that. This time what I'm going to do is console out console.log start now has been clicked. Pretty simple stuff, just what we're used to for JavaScript. I'm going to select to save that, and now with this button ready to go, I'm going to preview this page. We've got our hello world appearing here, and when we select our button here, we can see that start now has been clicked, continues to pop up every time I select the start now button. So essentially this piece of code is working just traditionally like we are used to in terms of JavaScript, but it actually saves us a little bit of that effort because some of that hard work that's happening in the background for this event handler is just happening for us here in the background. Now, the thing I want to be able to do here is to maybe have this button actually be customized a little bit. Maybe we can change what the text is on the button itself, because right now it does say start now. We can also change this. This works very similar to jQuery. So we pass in the $sign with the W, which allows us to reference an element. Here in brackets, we're going to add our element. In this case, it's the ID of the button. So the ID of the button was start now. One of the nifty things that you get here is you get some autocompletes. So here, when we pass in label, and the label can be hello world, we'll hit save on that, and we'll select to preview now. Now, when we select it, we can see it's changed to hello world once we've selected it. Maybe we want to toggle it though. So this is where we can do an if script. We can grab the label here and check if that string for the label is equal to start now. If it is, we'll change it here to hello world. Otherwise, what we can do is we can do else, and then here we can pass in start now. So this is an if else, and essentially it's toggling what the string is. So let's hit save on that, and we'll select preview here. So now we have start now, we select it, it's hello world, and we select it again, it's start now again. So it's essentially, we've created a toggled button here. And this essentially is the same as JavaScript works, more or less. What we can do now is we can use the same sort of functionality to create events that trigger other elements on the page to interact. So for example, you could create your own tab bar, you could create something else, but this is the essentials to be able to get this up and running. We can use this now to create maybe a testimonial section or something like that. So I'm going to grab this paragraph item here. And right now I'm not going to edit it, but I'm going to pretend maybe this is one testimonial here, and say we want to have a few testimonials. As soon as we've got this one item here, we do have an ID. So I'm going to change this ID here to test for testimonial. And we can use this reference now alongside our button to maybe change the text that's in here. So that way we can view the next testimonial itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel out all the script we had previously. And I'm going to also change the button text here from start now to maybe, let's see, next testimonial. So what we're going to do for this will be essentially to toggle different testimonials as you select this button. So we're still using that same onclick handler, but this time we're grabbing the reference to this testimonial text. So let's pass in W, pass in the ID here, which is just test. And we've got a few different options here, and we want to just change the text in here. Now, instead of this being a label, this is now a HTML string. So if we test this HTML string, is it? No, actually, let me check. Instead of this being a label like it was before, this is actually text. And it's plain text. So this essentially should change depending on what we enter in here. Let's type in lorem ipsum, because that's my favorite piece of text. And let's hit save on that. Essentially what will happen is when we select our button, this text for the testimonial should change to lorem ipsum. So let's create a preview, and we can see it has. So this is where we could create maybe a variable of testimonials. And for this variable of testimonials, we could loop through this array and have different text in here. So we can have this, we can have this, and maybe we can have the text that's in here even right now. And let's create this loop to simply pass in the next iteration of that. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the text reference that's in there right now. So if I say put in lorem ipsum as the very first result, then we can loop through and find what index that is in our testimonial. So we'll go, let's see, let index, or let current item equal, how can we do this? Maybe we can do a option in here, active index is equal to, say, 0. And we can increase that active index. So we'll do active index ++. And then we'll also do if active index is greater than 3, we'll set active index to equal 0. So pretty standard stuff here. And the text will essentially be a testimonial with the array of the active index. So that'll loop through our testimonials here. Let's select save on that, and we'll select a preview. And now, as we can see, it's looping through them. I do believe I might have an issue there where the fourth iteration seems to be set to undefined. So let's see what's happened there. So we've got our first, second, and third. If equals to or greater than 3. There we go. So let's save that again. That's what happens when you don't look at your code too clearly. So ideally, that could just be, say, greater than 2 instead of greater than 3. Let's hit save on that, and we'll hit preview once more. And now we're going through our testimonials perfectly fine. And this is an example of how you could build out maybe a slider or something more complex, but it's just JavaScript essentially. So this is really cool. Now, if you take this to the next level, you could probably build out some really good functionality, but at least this gives you the stepping stones of how to do this yourself if you want to customize editorx. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit like and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.